Hello and welcome to the Gaggle Mobile Challenge. And if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, we are now into day 16
Yeah.
of this war of choice undertaken by the United States and Israel against Iran. And there are obviously a lot of very mysterious aspects to it. The most mysterious aspects as to why the United States did so. That still hasn't really been explained. We've had a variety of convoluted explanations offered by Secretary of State Marco Rubio and by Trump himself. And then we've had the rantings and ravings of Pete Hegseth. But nonetheless, the basic question, which is why go to war against Iran, which is essentially a war is supposed to be your last resort. It's not really your first resort. So therefore, what was the urgency to do this? So that hasn't really been
Well,
answered.
but it makes. I'll add. I'll thicken the sauce here for you, George.
Hmm.
Where I accept reporting that this was the decision to start this war was at the end of last year in Mar-a-Lago. Okay, so all right, let's just say January 1st. Okay,
Hmm.
and then to February 28th.
Hmm.
That's 2 months. You can't craft a story.
Right.
You can't craft a story in 2 months.
Right.
And
Right.
then, and as all we all know, that as soon as the attack started, by the hour, the explanation changed. So
Right.
I find that very peculiar. I
Yeah.
mean, one thing seems to be sure is that they definitely wanted to do this, and they'd say, "We'll figure out why later."
Right. Right. That's right. So, as far as we can tell, and really, we're still speculating here. As far as we can tell, the original plan seemed to have been, well, we'll knock out the supreme leader, Khamenei, and then we'll knock out some of the general staff and the commanders of the IRGC and the intelligence and so on, and then everything will collapse. Presumably, either that and the people will come out in the street and seize power, or there'll be the Dulce Rodriguez option, which Trump seemed to have just repeated ad nauseum, that the Dulce Rodriguez. So he's in the last few days he seems to have cut back on the Dulce Rodriguez talk. Um, it's very odd to go into a war with only a plan A. In other words, just hoping for the best case scenario. I mean,
Yeah,
that doesn't
and a
seem to be
pretty
good planning. Best case scenario very rarely works out.
well. It's a flimsy one too. Everything has to work perfectly. And on top of it, all of the assumptions have been proven wrong in a cascade effect.
Right,
Okay. I mean, once it started going wrong, it kept going wrong. There was
right,
nothing to correct it.
right. That's right. That's right.
Well, you're right. You're right. You don't do something like this on a flimsy plan, a plan A.
Yeah,
You don't decide and throw a Hail Mary.
that's right. That's right. And so that part is baffling, and particularly when all of the reports that we have had from multiple people, but especially from the Omani foreign minister, that there seemed to be a deal in the works. There seemed to be very close to an agreement that Trump could have easily turned around and said, "Yeah, this is a much better deal than the one obtained by Obama. I
And
succeeded. I worked the oracle.
and Nobel Peace Prize.
Nobel Peace Prize. I did it. So yeah, okay, well that's a deal. And so
Well, I mean, I'm glad you brought up the Omani representative. He got on a plane. He was proactive. I mean, I've got to tell the world what's going on right now. I mean, there is reporting now that Witkoff and Jared Kushner, they just simply could not understand the mechanics of the deal that was being proposed. It was just way above their head. And I have to believe, given what we know about both these gentlemen here, They didn't want a deal. We know that Trump told them it doesn't matter what you talk about with these guys, it's going to happen. Okay, we don't know that as a fact. I would assume that they probably did.
That's right. I think so too. Um, and that's what and you're right, because the Omani foreign minister did think that this was very important to get that message out, because I guess he must have sensed that the Americans are now determined to go to war, and he wanted to get the message out. Hey, they may want to go to war, but there was a deal that was ready to be signed. There was no need for this. And so I think that's why it was so important that what he did. He flew to Washington to say, "Hey, we're very close to a deal," and then he went on that interview with Margaret Beckett, and again, was there to told her in detail what exactly was seemed to have been agreed upon.
No,
So,
the operative words there, in detail.
right,
Very, very serious man.
right,
And one has to assume that he understood that Kushner and Witkoff simply couldn't comprehend what they were being told.
right.
And for goodness sake, Joe, you and I, we follow this here. But if it's something of that magnitude, I said maybe we ought to, like some guys that know something
You
about
know
physics,
something about the
something like
technology? Yeah,
that. Maybe that
exactly.
would be a good idea to have as
Right,
backup here. I
right,
mean, putting you at the table and war the clock is ticking, you've got 49 minutes, okay, I'm just like, I'm not qualified to do this. Okay,
right,
I can comment maybe for my perch to say if it was a good idea or a bad idea, but I couldn't decide something like
right,
that.
right. That's right. That's right. And then we get to the point where neither Kushner nor Witkoff could be said to be a disinterested
No.
negotiator. They are both fervently pro-Israel. Well, Kushner is a personal family friend of Netanyahu. I mean, which I think automatically should disqualify him as any kind of a
Well,
negotiator.
Netanyahu essentially tucked him in at night as a child.
Exactly, exactly. When Netanyahu used to stay in his bedroom when he stayed at the Kushner's house, and Witkoff very fervently pro-Israel. So they were never suitable as any kind of negotiators. I mean, I mean, they didn't have the minimum. They didn't even pass the minimum test of being somehow even-handed, or at least making a show of even-handedness. So
Well, or even demonstrating they understand what's being
yeah,
discussed.
that's right. That's
I think, and Mark told us, I think it was a week ago or 2 weeks ago, which is a very interesting observation, is that I can accept that Trump doesn't trust the State Department, okay, and I can understand why he wants to have his own people, but why isn't it like um, um, Friedman? I mean, here's a guy that knows what he's talking about. I mean, about just about everything you could throw at him, he could give you an answer. Why wouldn't you want to, if you want to have a trusted hand, why don't you have a trusted, competent hand?
right, right, right. So we're really back to our operative assumption, which we have to go with, that Trump always wanted to do this. Trump always intended to launch this attack on Iran, and that therefore these negotiations were a ruse. Now that's all right. If that is the case, that is very problematic, because you never want to be the kind of leader who engages in negotiations only as a ruse. I mean, that those are the bad leaders, in the past, that we have, despised and reviled, the people who just engaged in negotiations when they'd already decided to go to war. And yet that seems to be what
Munich,
happened.
Munich.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's, exactly. That's the case. You don't really want to be that kind of a leader. I mean, in other words, the other party enters into negotiations, and you're just using it to put them at their ease, and then you can launch a surprise attack. Um, that's just wholly reprehensible. And now, if we're thinking about what happened on February the 28th, um, it seems like the reason why these leaders all were in the room was that they were convinced that the attack wouldn't take place. I mean, so it seems like they were assured that there would be no attack. Now, you could say, well, they were naive to believe American assurances, but nonetheless, if American did give them this assurance that there'd be no attack this weekend, and then they attacked and killed the supreme leader and his family, then that again, that is really, really, that's very
Well,
reprehensible.
but there's a cascade effect when if this is how the predicate of all of this here. What about all of your Gulf allies? You didn't tell them what you were up to.
Right,
You didn't give them a heads up. Maybe you better keep that night shift well stocked because
right.
things are about to happen. I mean, the level of deceit here is just so thick and odious, a betrayal on so many different levels. And again, and I don't think George is interested, and I'm not really interested in the wag the dog theory here. But I mean, what? How did Netanyahu convince Donald
Well,
Trump to
that's
do?
that's the other aspect of
I mean,
it.
how? I guess I mean, no other president was willing to do it.
Yeah,
Okay, we
yeah.
know that they tried it with Biden twice and it failed.
And they tried
Okay,
it with Biden. They tried it with Obama. They tried it with Clinton. They tried it with Bush. This has been an ongoing project of Netanyahu since 1996. So that's a 30-year project until they finally seized on Trump. So first of all, there's a question: how was Netanyahu able to persuade him? But then the interesting aspect is why would Trump essentially toss away his presidency? I mean, in other words, you came back this miraculous comeback in 2024 against all the odds. You pulled this off. You won a historic
you
victory.
won every battleground state.
Exactly. You won the popular vote, and then you had a mandate. You had, without question, you won a mandate. Why would you toss that away? That seems to be a very very intriguing question, and that I think it has to be answered on a psychological level.
Yeah.
There's something. I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but there's something deeply wrong in Trump's mind.
Well,
There's some self-destructive instinct
yeah.
operating with him.
Yeah, and then in the early days of the operation, you and I pointed it out. He kept making references to Venezuela, Venezuela,
That's right. Yeah.
Venezuela.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, in politics, you lie to the public, but it's not a good idea to lie to yourself,
Right.
okay? Because historic operation. There was this was a not what a war, but it was a police action. He was a fugitive. Yeah, we heard all of this here, but the fact of the matter is, there is no denying the fact that it was an inside job and he was given up. Maduro was
That's
given
right.
up.
Yes.
So it's not really a spectacular victory. It's not, Netflix isn't going to make a series
Right.
about it. Okay.
Right.
People were paid up. George and I speculated. Well, you pushed it more than I did. Money is always an
Right.
incentive. It
That's
looks
right.
like
That's right.
people got paid.
That's right. And because I remember what they did with Milosevic. They just paid people off. They paid off the people around him, and they betrayed him. You dangle enough money before people, and they'll betray their leader. To whom they'd apparently sworn undying loyalty. But you dangle some money in front of them, and yeah, they'll sell him out. Well, yeah, you can do that. You can do that in Serbia. You can do that in Venezuela. Iran was always going to be a much more difficult case.
Syria.
Yeah, that's right. Syria, exactly. Yeah, people will take money. That wasn't going to work with Iran, and so that's clearly where we are. Plan A hasn't worked. It doesn't look like Plan B or Plan C is working either, because Iran is essentially playing to its own strengths. It's not going to fight the war that the United States and
Exactly.
Israel would like it to fight. Obviously, I
Exactly.
mean they're going to fight the war they want to fight, and they're not going to surrender. So now Trump has put forward this wartime objective of unconditional surrender, but without any real means of achieving an unconditional surrender. I mean, he can apply more and more force. I mean, he can do that. That's still not going to deliver unconditional surrender.
Well, the history of unconditional surrender. I think was it in Casablanca when Roosevelt made the announcement that they
Right,
wouldn't accept anything less than unconditional surrender, particularly on Germany. I think it was focused on Germany, not
right,
necessarily Japan. And Churchill and Stalin were aghast.
right.
I mean, they put on a good public faces, but what are you talking about? Okay, it's not a good idea to do it that way.
Not a good
Okay.
idea. And of course, it prevented an earlier, much earlier conclusion to the war. Because then none of the German generals had any incentive to overthrow Hitler because they said, well, we overthrow Hitler and then we have to surrender unconditionally. And then we will get blamed for the unconditional surrender and we will be reviled in history as the people who betrayed Germany, who stabbed Germany in the back. Why should we do this?
It's really interesting because for the most part, German generals got off the hook for the Second World War.
They did. They did.
They
But they
did.
and they did not take part in the July plot. I mean, they did not take, you go through all the top generals, had no part in the July plot. They said, well, why should we do this? We're going to lose the war. Yeah, but at least we're not going to get blamed for for losing this war.
But see, again, well, neither one of us are psychologists, and we're just going to add layers, maybe kind of randomly. But is this, the Hollywoodization that that's how he understands American foreign policy? Is that, if FDR could demand it, I can demand it. I mean, he's got these guys' portraits all around him,
Yep.
and it's tough to measure up to these people. I mean, were they great leaders? That's a totally different question, okay? George and I can pick apart every single president, okay? But but Trump doesn't do that. He
Yes.
knows that FDR is very much part of the world the world that is coming to an end.
Right.
That's
Right.
for sure, okay?
That's right.
Ronald Reagan, does he measure up? And unconditional surrender that's pretty macho, but is that smart?
Yeah. Right. Right. Well, that's it. But as we've discussed many times before, Reagan knew when to stop, and he knew when basically it wasn't worth it to continue with a foolish venture. So he withdrew the U.S. Marines from Lebanon after the bombing of the Beirut barracks because he thought this is a stupid venture, and
And George,
yep.
did he survive politically?
He absolutely survived politically
He
because that was
did,
1983, and he was
right?
overwhelmingly re-elected the very next year, 84. So he absolutely survived. But the same thing happened in Central America. He signed agreements. So he didn't pursue this with this war against Nicaragua to the bitter end. So he knew that you got to kind of lower your aspirations. So we then say, well, why has Trump done this? Well, the only explanation that has always made sense, well, because of Israel. Because who wants unconditional surrender? Well, Israel. Who wants regime change? Israel. Who wants the destruction? When he starts talking about changing the borders, who wants all that? Israel. So then we go back to your question. Well, why has Trump done this? Why does Netanyahu have this grip on him?
And well, not only that is that it looks like everyone that's around him. I mean, George, it's very difficult for Donald Trump to surprise us now. And remember, everybody, he's been with us for a decade. Okay. But when he said that, and I'm paraphrasing here, is that Jared Kushner said that they were going to attack us. I mean, what about this $1 trillion intelligence community that you have, and you listen to your son-in-law who has financial interests in all of these negotiations?
Right.
Um, I find that terrifies me because I mean, if that's how decisions are being made,
Okay.
Radcliffe, I mean, if you look at some of the reporting over at the Gray Zone here, I mean, he's just the Mossad stenographer. Those are their words. Um, Marco Rubio. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much he was involved. I think the biggest political casualty outside of Trump himself and his entire presidency is J.D. Vance.
Right.
Okay, I think he's toast. I'm sorry. I
Well,
think
I mean,
no, on March 15th at 6:33 p.m. Moscow time, I'm saying he's toast.
I think that's probably true with the one possibility, and that doesn't really work for Trump, which is they might yet invoke the 25th Amendment and remove him from power, which is a possibility. I mean, distant, but not impossible. Um, but there's also the possibility that if the everything continues to go south, and there's going to be an obliteration in the midterms in November, and not only the Democrats win the House, but they win the Senate, then not only is Trump impeached, there's a possibility he'll be convicted. I mean, we know,
And who
let's say you
who do
have,
you need to who do you need to do what after?
well, that's right. But let's say the Democrats get 53 53 senators. Okay, that's already 53 that's going to vote to convict Trump. So they only need 14 Republicans. It's a tall order, not impossible. There are a lot of Republicans who don't like
Not
Trump.
impossible.
Yeah,
It's not impossible because there'll be a what's the term I want? There's going to be a momentum
yeah,
because the Republican Party doesn't want to be blamed for the next great recession. It was Trump. It
right,
wasn't us.
right,
That's how they're going to do this, George. You're
right,
going to say for the sake of the country, for the sake of the party.
right.
Okay.
That's right. That's right.
I don't. And when we phrase it that way, 14 is not a tall order.
No, not at all. Given that those senators don't like him, and given that they think, hey, he's led us to disaster, and if we stick with him, we are facing obliteration in 2028. Why not get rid of him, have a fresh face, and we have a shot. I mean, after all, the Democrats did it with Joe Biden. They said basically, okay, they did it with only about 2 months to go. Decided, hey, why don't we just change horses and we'll have a fresh face on the party. That didn't work, but at least they might think we might survive. I mean, we'll lose, but at least we'll lose respectably rather than we'll lose in a landslide.
At least we'll survive.
Right,
Those are the
right,
operative words.
right.
Okay. Now, if this thing continues exponentially going south, what we're saying here is very realistic and even predictable, I would say.
Right.
I mean, this erratic behavior going. Did you see any of the Kentucky rally? It
I
was
see. Yes, yes,
it was dead.
yes,
It was
yes,
dead.
yes. That's
I
right.
mean, you don't get more red
Yes,
than Kentucky.
that's right. That's right. That was remarkable because he kept saying, we've won," and then
And there
you
was no cheering.
there was no cheer. You saw these people behind him, and they were wearing their MAGA hats, and no one was cheering. They were not persuaded by "We've won, we've won," and that was quite shocking. I mean, this is his base. I mean, they show up for this rally, and they're not persuaded that we've won. So that's
And I can't remember the guy's name, the guy that he's endorsing. This was a never Trumper guy.
yeah,
He left the Republican Party after Trump got the nomination in 2016.
yeah,
Okay. And then he rejoined the party when Biden became president. I mean, who the hell is this guy and why was he chosen?
right, right, yeah.
And and Kentuckians, they know their local politics. They got a problem. They think this guy is a carpetbagger. I mean, why? I mean, it's almost to the point of derangement. I mean,
It's
why this guy?
That's right. And indeed, his hatred for Thomas Massey is truly
Oh, it's just truly ridiculous.
off the chart. I mean, to hate this person. I mean, this is a person who is very much a part of MAGA. He's a libertarian. Maybe there are things that he views that he holds that isn't yours. But to hate him in this way, somebody who is anti-war, consistently anti-war, anti-big government, anti-censorship of free speech. These are all things you should be in favor of. Had a very good record on COVID. Basically it was against all the shutdowns and mandatory vaccination and all the rest. And to hate him in this way, this constantly ranting and raving about Massey, that just shows a lack of judgment, a serious lack of judgment on Trump's part.
I mean, Massey is being confronted with just tons of outside money trying to crush him.
Right.
And George and I have talked about it. Money is very important in elections, but it's not always determinative.
No,
Okay.
that's right.
And I think Massey's going to get a massive um, um, backing in his re-election bid. I think it's just that way. He doesn't. All he has to do is do a couple of clips from that rally. Let Trump do it for him.
That's right.
It's,
Sure.
this is kind of the inexplicable stuff. This is a time you need to circle the wagons, not going attacking the most popular figures in your party.
Right.
And Marjorie Taylor Greene is still out there,
Yes, she is.
not as a political force, but as a commentator. And she
Yep.
still gets a lot of attention. So we will see where that goes. I mean, I'm sure when Massey's on the campaign trail, he's going to have her along, and people are going to cheer.
Yeah.
She's adored in the party,
That's right.
adored.
That's right. That's right. And Tucker Carlson is there. Now, Tucker Carlson is a interesting case because he feels personally bound to Trump. I mean, I know he has a personal fondness for him, and you can respect that. I mean, if you have a friend, it's very hard to turn against a friend. So he likes Trump personally, but he's absolutely, that he's not in any way, shape, or form endorsing this plan. I mean, he goes, in one podcast after another, he's denouncing this and making clear this has nothing whatever to do with America First, the very platform on which Trump ran. And therefore he said, yeah, people feel very betrayed. And as they should be
That's
betrayed.
the word he used,
Yeah,
portrayed.
yeah.
No, I mean, I've made it very clear. I mean, I'm so of a single mind about this, and I remember doing our podcast during the 12-day war. I said Trump should be impeached here and now, and that was then.
Right, right. Yeah. But he will be. I think he will be impeached. I think there's no question of that. And this could play a role. They absolutely could play a role in this case. Say, hey, this is an abuse of power. He's
And
basically
it is, and it is.
he's not been forthright about how he arrived at this decision to wage an unnecessary war, a war that has had deleterious consequences. And these consequences are obviously the consequences for the world economy, as was entirely predictable. And that goes back to what is Iran trying to do? Well, Iran is trying to inflict pain on the United States, pain on Israel, and pain on the world economy, and of course, pain on America's allies in the Gulf. And that's all Iran has to do, just to inflict pain. Iran cannot defeat the United States, but Iran knows that it cannot defeat the United States. It just has to keep inflicting greater and greater pain.
Why couldn't it have been Greenland? Okay. Because all you'd have to do is send, I don't know, a company or a platoon or whatever the numbers are of Marines or the Army, just land at the airport and just say, give me the keys.
Right,
Okay.
right.
It's ours.
That's right.
I mean, it could have even been that simple. But then you chose a country that is not a near peer. And certainly, Iran is not a near peer to the United States militarily,
Right,
but it has the capacity and the assets to resist and resist very strongly,
right,
which it's doing.
right.
Now, that is not a bright idea. That's not a smart idea.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's
And from what we understand, and we've talked to Mohammed Morandi and other experts on Iran, every single assumption this administration was working from was wrong. The people rallied around the
right.
flag.
That's right.
Okay. And and I've seen it too. Again, I can't verify any video I see on X. Okay. But I've been told, there are demonstrations in support of the supreme leader, in support of the government, and you see what appears to be missiles or drones in the sky, and people are still out there supporting their government. That takes a lot of balls to do
Yeah.
that. Okay, it says something about those people, about how they feel.
Yes.
And we didn't get to talk about it this morning, but I mean, I'll ask you now, George, is the Straits of Hormuz the crucible of this whole war?
Well, it looks like it. That's right, because that is it's become a real problem. Because if essentially Iran is deciding who goes in, who goes out, who doesn't go in, and who doesn't go out. So it's up to Iran. So Iran says, okay, China, oil destined for China, boom, that's fine. Off you go. Oil destined for anybody else, anybody in the Western countries. Nope.
including India, including
No,
India.
yeah, exactly. Nope. That you're not going through. Now, so the United States is now, and this is, Trump has said, well, okay, well, we're going to provide escorts for the tankers. But that's a very difficult endeavor because there are an awful lot of tankers, and you don't have that many naval vessels to provide an escort for all of the vessels and the for all of the tankers. So they could still be shot at these the naval vessels, and the tankers could still be shot
And the
at.
tankers.
Yeah, exactly. They can be shot. The moment you start shooting at tankers, means no insurance company is going to, offer any kind of insurance. So, but that means if the tankers can't get through, that means you can't produce oil because the oil storage depots are now full. So that you can't produce any oil because there's nowhere to store the oil.
And the fertilizer.
And the fertilizer, which is this is kind of planting season in the United States. So the farmers, they need the fertilizer. So that's a problem, and so now Trump says, okay, well, we'll provide naval vessels, and then other countries are going to join in. Well, so far I haven't heard any countries, sending
Uh-huh.
their naval vessels in.
Well, yeah, the Charles de Gaulle is being sent, but they're not going there to escort any vessels. They're doing that as a total waste of money. They cannot add whatsoever one scintilla to the what the Americans are doing. The thing that's, this administration, last night was the hardest bombing of this campaign, and 2,000 targeted assets were destroyed and all that. Yeah, well, you could do that all day, all night for the rest of the year. It's not going to change
No,
anything.
no. And that's
It's
it. And
not
that
going to change anything.
no, and that's what's so interesting because Trump said, "Oh, we hit Carg Island." Oh, really? He said, "Well, we hit all the military installations on Carg Island, but we didn't hit the oil infrastructure. But maybe we will if Iran continues to block the Strait of Hormuz." Well, Iran continues to block the Strait of Hormuz. They haven't attacked the oil infrastructures yet because if they do, Iran has made clear we're going to hit all the oil infrastructure in the Gulf. I mean, it's going to be tit for tat.
Yeah,
So, and Trump
and
knows
look
this,
at
which is why he hasn't hit the oil infrastructure.
go visit a map,
Right,
okay? So when you say you have the globe, and now let's go focus in. And as Iran gets smaller and smaller as you focus in, or actually get bigger and bigger as you focus in, you see these tiny little countries,
yeah,
okay?
yeah,
These Gulf, they're brands. They're. I mean, I don't see them as really nation states in the modern sense whatsoever. Um, um, they will not survive this. And essentially, Iran can do this in a few days.
right,
But they put their mind to it. It's kind of lobbying. I
right,
mean, it's not like, we have to go over 5 countries.
right.
Okay. It's just like over the water, boom.
That's right. That's right. Now, Hexeth and Trump, say, "Oh, we've knocked out everything they have," but they obviously haven't. So they say they don't have anything left. Well, they obviously do. I mean, day after day, they're still hitting the Gulf states. They're still hitting Israel. So you haven't knocked out everything. So therefore, the plan to seize Carg Island is not really a feasible one because
Well, what are you gonna? Okay,
he
what are they gonna do? Okay, seize it. Then what?
well, that's a good question. Then what? Then presumably, well, Iran won't be able to get its oil out. Okay, um, but that means they're sitting ducks because
Yeah,
if Iran still has missiles, they're going to just keep hitting any forces occupying Karg Island. So yeah,
Gallipoli.
you're going to sustain huge casualties just trying to hold on to Karg Island. And then, of course, the other plan is, well, why don't we seize Iran's southern coast, and that way we'll be able to get the Strait of Hormuz. So therefore we'll get that's a very costly. Going to well,
Go ahead.
Normandy beaches trying to seize Iran's southern coast. Oh,
How many mountain ranges are they going to have to go over to get there?
yeah,
I mean, again, everyone, a topographical map of Iran. It's a nightmare.
right, right,
Well, no wonder Iran has been around so long. It's pretty
right.
hard to conquer.
That's right. So any attempt, let's if they seize the coastline, they're sitting ducks. Iran is just gonna keep hitting them, and America's gonna start suffering very serious casualties. I mean, how many have already been killed? I mean, I know 13. I think 13 Americans are now dead. It's going to quickly escalate to much higher numbers. So any attempt seize Karg Island or seize the Iran southern coastline, those are very heavy casualty numbers, and you have no real hope of continuing to hold them because of these with these drones. I mean, Iran has a lot of these drones. You can just keep hitting any
Okay.
American occupying forces with these drones.
Okay. So, okay. Maybe Saudi Arabia will use that pipeline that crosses the country, enters into the Red Sea. That's how we'll get our oil to market. Well, first of all, the capacity of that pipeline is quite limited. And lo and behold, who's going to be there to meet them?
Right,
The
right,
Houthi. The Houthi are waiting for
right.
the green light.
That's right. That's
They
right.
will shut down the Red Sea again. And how many months did Trump try? 3, 4 months, and
Yeah,
couldn't do it
that's right. That was
against the Houthis.
That's right. But then of course, if one starts thinking about the long-term prospects, and we were discussing this issue this morning, Trump went to Riyadh in the early days of his administration, and he delivered that major speech, and we did a couple of podcasts on that major speech. It was a good speech. No more regime change, no more imposing regimes on alien cultures. Every
And you have
nation has
everything.
its own destiny.
Yeah, exactly. You
Yeah.
have all the makings to do it yourself.
That's right, exactly. No, we're not telling you how to run your affairs, and it all sounded really fine. And then he made that pitch, the Middle East, which was known for tribal conflicts or religious conflicts, all that is in the past. The new Middle East, high tech, AI, big investment. This is the new Middle East, and it was inspiring stuff. And everything. For this is great. This is the new vision. This is the new
They liked it.
Trumpian world. And look at that. Who is going to invest in the Gulf states? All the $1 trillions, trillions and trillions were going to be invested in these Gulf states. And they, in turn, were going to invest trillions in the U.S. economy. Well, who's going to invest? If this war is going to continue, and it doesn't look like it's going to come to an end, that means you're still sitting ducks. People
Well,
sitting
I
in
mean,
hotels in Dubai, and suddenly this hotel is hit by a drone. Who's going to do that?
it all depends on how it's resolved. And what we've learned since the start of this conflict is that, you know what, George? Iran has a veto in all of this. Okay. So, Mark said to us earlier he thought that the U.S. would continue to have a military presence in the Gulf. I'm not sure that's true because I don't know if these Gulf monarchies want that. Okay. I mean, well, the whole thing was to protect them from Iran. No, this was all for Israel, and they all know it.
Right. That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Right. Right.
So,
The one issue, however, which is the United States generally doesn't do what hosts ask the United States to do. You remember when the Iraqi parliament in 2020 voted to expel U.S. forces from Iraq? Well, nothing happened. I mean, it was Trump. Trump was president at the time, and he said, "Nah, we're staying." And ever since then, Iraq has continued to demand that U.S. forces leave, and U.S. forces don't leave. So therefore, the Gulf monarchies, I think they probably will think, hey, how about starting to wrap up your bases? Nah, I think we're going to
yeah,
stay.
but see, but maybe this is, I'm not a regional expert on this, but given the broken promises and the destruction that I mean, we still don't have a clear idea of the level of destruction. It seems vast. Okay. Maybe demilitarizing the Persian Gulf. I mean, maybe these monarchies would go along with that. Okay. I don't know. I just see my operating my theory of the case is this is that there is no returning to the status quo ante. Okay, that's my baseline. Okay, and so returning to a vast military American military presence in the Persian Gulf. I don't think that's going to happen. Okay. Now, is this the end of the American empire? No, no, it's not. Okay. I know people are salivating about. I see it on Twitter all the time. No, this is a huge. The United States and its partner Israel are experiencing a huge. Um, um, I don't want to be definitive defeat, but I mean they are facing something that I don't think they planned for. Now, the geopolitical implications of this moving forward, yeah, are you going to trust the United States with your security? That's a big question. That's a big question for a lot of countries. Okay,
Well,
but
that's right. Well,
but George gets ahead of the game by saying, and he's absolutely right. The Americans say, "Well, we don't want to leave."
yeah, and there's no, you can't force us. I mean, that's it. You know,
That's right. Okay.
you can't force us. I mean, I I think I think Trump said something like that to the Spanish prime minister because Spain was sort of talking, well, maybe we should sort of close some of the U.S. bases, and Trump just said, no, we're not closing any bases, and we're there. I mean, Spain, no Spain, I mean, we don't care. We're staying. So in practical terms, there's really not much you can do about the United States. I mean, they just say we're staying, and that's all
That's
there is to it.
John Mearsheimer, on a number of occasions, he said that the United States is Godzilla. And when you ask Godzilla to leave, he'll say, "Nah, I don't think I'm going to go anywhere."
No,
Okay.
nah, no, I don't feel like it. It's just not, so. I think now the question is, how does this resolve itself? Now, I mean, there's always a possibility Iran will just collapse. I mean, the ideal scenario for America and Israel, that doesn't look likely. And so if it doesn't look likely,
But
then
I think again, this is our realism.
right,
Okay. Um, is there a possibility that Iran just suddenly collapse? Yeah, I think there's a possibility. Is it probable? I don't think so. Is it a high percentage? I don't think so. But everybody, let's all calm down, cool down. Yeah, it's still possible. Okay.
yeah, yeah, I think so. I think so.
Just
Yeah.
just trying to stay real.
No, I think
Okay.
so. I think so. That's a possibility. Now, if it doesn't happen, and Iran, because there's no evidence that this is on the cards, then how does the United States get out? This, or, and as we discussed this on Friday, this idea that realists are putting forward, oh, well, just declare victory and go home, that isn't on. You could have done that within, in the first 24 hours. You could have said, okay, we'll declare victory and then go home. You can't do it now. I mean, basically,
Yeah,
because
I mean, once they had verified the murder of the supreme leader, that is the only off ramp that was available.
right,
Now those off ramps are gone.
that's right, that's right. Because and Iran has made clear we're not interested in a ceasefire. Ceasefire obviously doesn't work in Iran's favor because a ceasefire means, hey, America and Israel is gonna come back and do this again in 6 months' time. They're going to use the next 6 months to replenish, everything that they lost during this round, and then they'll be ready to hit us again.
And importantly, under that scenario, they will know Iran's battle plan in
Right,
advance.
right,
Okay, that's something that you don't, because from what I've been told, and I'm not a military expert, is that Iran learned very quickly to change its battle plan after the 12-day war. It looks like it's being played out by people that know what they're talking about.
right,
The United States and Israel, it's just air power, air power, air
right,
power. Oh, decapitations.
right.
Okay, decapitations and air power.
That's right. That's right. But the decapitation thing is a peculiarly Israeli plan. The Israel's modus operandi is assassinations, which is of very limited use because you kill the leaders of the opposite side. Okay, well, what have you accomplished? Somebody else is going to take over, but you're basically you don't really have anyone to negotiate with because the people who were in charge before, they're not in charge. There's somebody new there. So that's America seems to have embraced the Israeli plan of action, and therefore that didn't really accomplish anything as far as Iran's
Yeah,
concerned
but
because
I think
Iran managed to continue. They recovered very quickly, and they haven't hit anybody since then. I mean, either that first day they took out this top leadership, but they haven't taken out any top leaders at all. Larijani was in that march. He was seen in public during that Al-Quds march, They could have taken him out. They obviously decided that that wasn't such a good idea. So it's not a viable military operation. And so obviously the Americans have told Israel, hey, just cool it with this assassination.
Yeah,
That's not really not getting us anywhere.
cool it with these assassinations, okay? I don't see that's the dynamic that's the variable we don't
Yeah, we don't.
understand.
I agree.
And that's what
I'm just thinking about why didn't they kill that?
I get, but see what's interesting to me is that we see it seems apparent that the Trump administration is embracing this Israeli approach to regime change. But we commented on it at the very beginning. Is that Israel wants to go past, present, and future leaders, which means again, that closes off a possible off ramp because I think Trump is just like, who do we need to talk to?
Right.
Okay,
Yes.
we need to talk to somebody about this.
Right.
Okay, real quiet, but we need to talk to someone. And the Israelis are saying we're not talking to
Right.
anyone.
Right.
Okay, and those two policies
Right.
cannot continue
No.
much longer. I
No,
mean,
that's
parallel.
right. That's right. Because Israel doesn't want to engage in any negotiation. That's the Israeli plan, which is, hey, we don't want to talk. We want this to continue, and above all, we want the United States
Indeed, to
to
continue.
continue. So the United States will be bogged down for another 20 years in this an endless war against Iran. Fantastic for us. We don't have to. That'll be. It's an American problem. We don't have to worry about that. We'll deal with the Gaza issue. That's the Israeli plan. Trump, I think, realizes that he's got to get himself out of this, but then, but with whom is he going to negotiate? And as we were saying, there's no incentive for Iran to negotiate. So therefore, Iran is going to extract the price. So even if they're not going to get America to close down its bases, they're going to get something out of it. They're going to say, "Hey, you got to lift sanctions," and
Yep.
we need some kind of a written agreement from you that you're not going to do this again in 6 months' time. Now, maybe it has no validity, but I think any Iranian leader is going to want some kind of a pledge from the United States that he's not going to do this again. Ever. So, what?
Yeah. I
Otherwise,
mean,
yeah, yeah, go.
because of how convoluted and dishonest the Europeans have dealt with the Ukraine issue. What about security guarantees? And I want to reiterate because it's very, very important. Security guarantees have to go across the board for
Right.
everybody, okay? And that's why it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but that's the only way peace is going to be maintained once this is over, where all the important players they all have security guarantees. Will Israel go along with that? Again, see, once you get in bed with these people, you know, you know, you lose control because Israel will always be maximalist, okay? And then you have these Huckabee nuts and stuff like that that just go along with it. It's so mindless, okay?
Yes.
I mean, one of the things that's really difficult in analyzing any of this because we would go use history, geopolitics, okay, strategy, or relative assets on all sides. You know, it's kind of creates a matrix. See, even if you don't think of it's a matrix, you do think that way when you think
Right.
of these things here. But Israel doesn't do that, okay,
Right.
and that's why this is much more of a messianic thing. And
Right.
I get people having religious belief. That's fine. Okay. But you can't, it's not a strategy.
Right. Right.
You can't translate that into a strategy.
Right. No, I think so. But I was thinking, whether there might be plans along the lines of the 1990s. You remember in the 1990s, the United States kept bombing Iraq. I mean, this was an ongoing thing from about 1990, all the way from about 1991 through to the invasion. There's these bombings of Iraq, and nobody really even knew why are we bombing Iraq. I mean, and oh well, they're developing something or other. Oh, Iraq made an incursion into Iraqi Kurdistan. There was some reason to bomb Iraq. and they may be thinking along those lines, but I don't think you can do that anymore because I think they're not going to succeed in disarming Iran. So the plan that, oh, we just maintain a kind of ongoing conflict with Iran and then we'll just perpetually be bombing Iran, that isn't going to work because
Well,
Iran has means at its disposal and it's going to continue to have means at its disposal of hitting back in the way Iraq couldn't hit back, but Iran will be able to hit back.
okay, we don't know because it's probably the most tightly held secret in Iran about its military industrial complex. How things are produced, how they're moved around, who makes the decision. We don't know. That is probably the blackest of all black boxes, and they should keep it that way. But if we apply the 1990s model that was used against Iraq and try to apply it to Iran, well, Iran will keep hitting Israel.
Yeah.
Okay,
Keep hitting
and
Israel, all the Gulf states.
and,
It
that,
just
and
keeps hitting Gulf
Israel's
states.
greatest weakness is that it doesn't have any um, um, uh, depth. Okay, I mean it's a postage stamp. It's small.
Right.
Okay, and that's their greatest liability. I mean, you focus all this firepower on a very small piece of real estate, and the Iranians have proven that they're capable of doing it. And that just brings up the topic again. Again, the most verboten thing to talk about is what kind of punishment is Israel? I mean, I'm sure you've seen it on Twitter too. I don't know what to believe. The Israelis are fighting each other. And then they show these videos which are heartbreaking. But again, I don't know if they're true. Where Christians are trying to get into these shelters and they're turned away, or Filipinos and they're turned away. I don't know if that's true. Okay, I'm not going to say, see, I never will, George, and I will never do that.
Right.
It's not evidence for me.
Right. No, I think that's right. But this really it raises the central problem here, which is that as long as Israel is there, Israel will be at war with its neighbors, and
That's
until
its
you remove,
DNA.
oh, yeah, until you remove all possible opponents of Israel, Israel will be at war with its neighbors. So that's why they were already planning. Well, hey, we've got rid of Iran. Well, let's deal with the Turkey problem.
Turkey.
Um, yeah, but you haven't got rid of Iran,
You got to kind of, in a morbid way, admire their ambition.
right,
Okay.
and in a way, they have succeeded in removing a number of their adversaries. I mean, they have removed Syria. That's out of the equation. Now there's with Giuliani. It's proof positive that ISIS was all along a Western agent. I mean, we always had suspicions, but this really proves that it was always something that run by the West. Libya, Gaddafi, that's out of the way, and Libya is immersed in a civil war. Saddam Hussein, he's gone. So obviously,
And Lebanon is forever broken.
exactly, Lebanon's forever broken, and again, Israel is planning yet another invasion, and so therefore, Iran was the prize. You know, knock Iran out. And then once you've got that, then the next prize down the road is Turkey. So this is the Israel problem. Yes, Israel is very small, and just doesn't have the resources. I mean, when we talk about that biblical thing, which Huckabee was talking about, that's all, oh, we'll occupy this territory. You don't have the manpower to occupy this huge amount of territory. I mean, Israel is very small, 9 million. I mean, that's it's the smallest country than Hungary. Even if every Jew from America moved into Israel, it still would only be about 16 million. I mean, how are you going to occupy this huge amount of territory? You obviously you
Well,
can't do
I
it.
mean, but what they want is sand traps, okay, like the United Arab Emirates, okay, that's what
Right.
they want,
That's right. Yeah,
okay,
yeah, yeah.
okay, but they don't necessarily want the Americans there. They want to do it
They
themselves,
wa- they
okay.
wanted they wanted
I
the
mean, because for all the United States sacrifices for Israel, financially, blood, okay, at the end of the day, the Israelis just want the Americans to do the job for them and then leave. They can take over, okay. They will have their vassals, okay. They will reproduce what the United States, what Trump at least wants to do in the Western Hemisphere. Israel is going to do it in West Asia. That's what they want. And they think, well, that's your sphere of influence. This is our sphere of
right,
influence.
but the
And
the, the
always be there to help us just in
but
case.
that's right. But that's Israel's problem, which is it simply isn't strong enough. And that's it can only accomplish, and it's always only been able to accomplish all of its great military feats thanks to the United States. It couldn't do it by itself. It's much too small, and over again, it's had to rely upon the United States. And then we really get to the heart of the problem, which we've touched on before, which is, well, nuclear weapons, because I mean, it's kind of been written about, and it hasn't really drawn much attention that in 1973, when Israel was really up against it in the Yom Kippur War, Israel got onto Nixon and said, "We're going to use nuclear weapons because we're basically we're facing complete catastrophe." And that spurred the Nixon administration on in delivering this massive airlift. I mean, that was a huge arms delivery. And why did they do it? Because suddenly Israel said, "Well, okay, well that's it. We're facing a catastrophe. We're going to use nuclear weapons." Now, ever since then, Israel has always had that on the back burner to use against the Americans, so that if the Americans don't come through, well, we're going to use nuclear weapons. And even now, when Marco Rubio said, "Well, we knew Israel was going to attack Iran, and we knew that therefore, and there was nothing we could do to stop Israel, so we had to join." That's, you can say that, well, we know Israel is going to use nuclear weapons, so we have to do something because we can't really allow the use of nuclear weapons. So that may still be
Yeah.
something that's going to be if this war in Iran isn't resolved in any way, that's still on the back burner that Israel will use nuclear
Well,
weapons.
now we're going into a realm that we never want to talk about, but we're here. Um, would that stop Iran if they were attacked by nuclear weapons? I don't know. I
Well,
don't
no,
know.
it's a very,
I
very
don't know.
good question.
It's all remember everyone. And that's why the great thing about podcasts is that you can have what is it, a side conversation. Japan didn't surrender
No,
because of Nagasaki and Hiroshima.
no, no,
Nope, it didn't.
no,
That's
no,
part of the lore.
yep, that's
But
right.
there's the historical evidence is the Soviet Union entered the
The
war.
Soviet, the
That's why
Soviet,
they decided to
and that's
surrender.
right, exactly, and was destroying the Kwantung Army. So it was that
And
military
and
catastrophe.
fast
Yeah, that's right.
and very, very
And very,
read
very, very
about it.
fast. That's
That
right.
is one of the most amazing military campaigns,
Right.
how an entire army collapsed. And I mean, in a
Right.
matter of weeks, it
Yeah.
was extraordinary.
Right.
Okay.
That's right.
But
That's right.
that brings me to the question is would that force Iran to leave the war? I don't know.
It's very hard to know.
I don't
Very,
know.
very hard to know. I mean, because it is true that killing civilians, that doesn't governments don't leave wars. I mean, that was really, when you said about Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that wasn't decisive for the Tokyo government because they'd lived through the carpet bombing of
Firebombing.
their cities, of Tokyo firebombing and other cities. I mean, this is city after city was destroyed, and that didn't cause Japan to surrender. So therefore, killing civilians, that isn't determinative for governments. Destroying military installation, destroying economic wherewithals, that might do it. But nuclear weapons are a very limited usefulness. So that's why, yeah, you can use it, but it's really horrifying. No one's done this since
It's
1945, but it doesn't achieve anything militarily.
its value is deterrence. It's not what it can actually do.
Right.
It's the idea of deterrence. Now, since we're gone down this path here, well, what kind of warheads are you going to use? What about the Persian Gulf? What about the Gulf monarchies? I mean, are they going to be subject to, I don't know how the weather patterns work in the Persian Gulf, but I mean, are you going to risk having radioactive sand and dirt all over that region?
Right.
Can you control the weather?
Right.
Okay. I mean, this opens up a can of worms that you don't really want to think about. Okay. And what if they don't surrender and you've used nuclear weapons?
That's right. But
Okay. Tehran, Isfahan, they're bombed, they're nuked. Okay, so we're going to move troops in?
They can't. You can't do it. You got the
So what you've done, what we'll have done, is committed the greatest crime in history, in the footsteps of the United States, following what we did in against the Japanese. And what if it doesn't work?
yeah. That's right. Um, but I would think that before that happens, we will have Israel, Netanyahu will come to Mar-a-Lago and will tell Trump, we're going to do it. Unless you do something, we're going to do it. And then that will pressure Trump to say, well, we got to do something. Otherwise, Israel's going to use nuclear weapons. No one has done this in 80 years. Israel's going to do it. So we have to do something. And what are we going to do? Well, I think we're going to have to think of a major invasion, which means we'd have to reintroduce conscription. What else? What I kind of agree, but I think you could get to the point when you have no means of resolving this other than to use, overwhelming military force, which is a an invading army, because there's nothing else that you have. So that I think will be the leverage that Netanyahu will have. Well, if you don't do it, if you don't do that, if you don't escalate your involvement, we have no choice but to use
Yeah.
nuclear weapons.
Well, if I were president, not Trump, but if I was president, say, so, BB, how many troops are you going to send in?
Well, yes.
Yeah, but see, what you're saying is really fascinating, but I don't even think Trump can do that. I just can't. I just can't see it. I mean, that's called a political extinction. Okay, first of all, you can't give a reason why we did this, and now you want to have a land war in Asia,
All right.
which is kind of like you don't do that. We don't do that anymore. Okay, but they did with Iraq. So yeah. So, but I these are all the known
These are all
unknowns.
unknowns, but this is where it does get interesting in terms of if you do introduce conscription. Well, first of all, you'd have to do it for both men and women. You can't just do it for men only. And you would then have to offer, you'd have to offer all kinds of incentives. I mean, I think, just to get people
How about citizenship?
citizenship, absolutely, exactly. Yeah, all the migrants. There's a lot of migrants in the country, so you offer them. You're going to have to. Oh, that's the first order of business. You're going to have to offer them citizenship, but everybody else, you're poor boys and poor girls. Hey, free college. You want to go to Harvard? I mean, we'll pay for your tuition at Harvard. Now, people will join. I mean, if you offer enough of an incentive, people will join. I mean, it's going to cost a lot. I mean, it's going to be hugely expensive. But in principle, it can be done.
Yeah, I'm just, this is when you start thinking of timelines, and we're in the beginning of the third week of this conflict. Conscription is called a year to get that rolling. We haven't had conscription for a very long time,
That's right.
okay? And considering the health of so many young people now, I wonder. They have been lowering the standards.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, George, just think of let's say we get there. I mean, the Russians and the Chinese are going to be going,
Right. No,
what are you
it's
guys
a
doing?
huge thing. First of all, you have to find barracks. I mean, where to train recruits, and then of course you'd have to get soldiers away from fighting duties to boring kind of disciplinary duties. Now you have to sort of teach people how to march, teach people how to load a gun and unload a gun, and all shooting practice. So that's what soldiers are going to be. Forget what you're doing. Wherever in Asia, you've got to come back to the United States to start training
Did you
raw recruits.
did you see? I want to say it was Stormtrooper, but I don't think that was it. It was Star Troopers. Did you see that film?
I don't think so.
Yeah, what the premise is that an alien civilization sends a what we would call a nuclear missile and hits Buenos Aires or something like that, and so we create this new branch of the military, and the Nazi overtones are just outrageous. I mean, it's really morbid, okay? This kind of nationalism and hatred, and they were called the bugs and all that. And that's what they're going to have to do. They're going to have to really pump this thing here because nobody knows why we're doing this, okay?
Oh,
I mean, Pearl Harbor. Oh, speaking of which, since again, this is a great thing about podcasts, all this talk of false flags, something that could happen in the United States to galvanize people. As far as I know, the Iranians have never done anything like that against the United States. They're claim, the greatest exporter of terrorism. There's
sure.
not much evidence to prove
No,
that,
no,
okay,
no.
whatsoever. And keep in mind, everyone, is that if we go through the great divide within Islam, Shia and Sunni. The Sunnis are, vast majority of terrorism around
Right,
the world
right,
is done by Sunnis, are not done by
right,
Shia.
right.
Okay,
That, yeah,
so, but I mean, that's a clean break. That's what they talked about that. Okay,
that's right.
so I am on edge about that.
There's
Okay,
always the line.
but I mean, a couple of people have pointed out, and it have to be tested that it might work just the reverse. You started this war with these people. Why? And now it's coming to us. What are you doing? It depends. It depends.
Right, but you see, the problem here is that the United States is now used to this kind of Israeli blackmail, and that's why you know we bring up this example of Nixon, and then Golda Meir tells Nixon, "Well, we're going to use nuclear weapons," and that forces the Nixon administration to send everything. I mean, the point is the United States didn't have anything. I mean, they just whatever you've got in your armory, we sent to Israel to the point where America itself was almost defenseless because everything was gone to Israel. So that's really what Israel has done all these years. You see, it's this blackmail. Well, we're going to use nuclear weapons. And when Marco Rubio says, he provides the timeline. Oh, we knew Israel was going to attack, so we didn't try to do anything to dissuade Israel from attacking. We decided we're going to preempt Israel and attack Iran. And then, of course, they came up with, oh, yeah, well, we preempted Iran by preempting Israel, and then we
Yeah,
launched
right.
an attack on Israel. It made less and less sense. But I think it's entirely plausible that it was Israel that said we're going to attack, and the Americans said, oh well, if you're going to attack, we need to join in. So I think in the same way, if Israel says, we don't have any choice. I mean, we're just getting hammered and hammered by Iran. We're going to have to use nuclear weapons. I mean, we don't have any choice. Um, how does the United States react to that? I don't think they're just going to say, yeah, go ahead. I mean, no problem here. They're going to have to do something drastic themselves.
I hope we don't get there,
I
George.
hope so too. But I think it's an option that
No, I
everyone
mean
has to consider.
the fact that we're talking about it is it's on the table. Obviously, it is, and that's why, it's a topic that I don't like because of the implications of it. I mean, it's a world-changing event. It normalizes the use of nuclear weapons, number one. Okay, is that some? And then the mad rush to get the bomb. Don't worry, you can always go to Pakistan and buy one. Okay, that's the kind of world we're moving toward.
Right.
Because once you very and I would and for me it would be a casual use, okay? Because you can always say we surrender. Okay? That's also a possibility, okay? Unlikely when it comes to the Israelis. And given the lack of spine from successive American administrations, it's very possible. But do you want Saudi Arabia to have the bomb?
Right.
You want Bangladesh to have one?
Right. Right.
Really? Really, everybody?
That's right.
Governments change all the time. Okay, all
Right.
of a sudden, oh, this government's in and they've got the nuclear football. Wonderful. Okay.
But it's a very interesting issue because, we've grown used to the idea. Well, of course, it's unthinkable to use nuclear weapons, but of course they have been used. I mean, they were used in 1945. 80 years is nothing. All right, for 80 years it was unthinkable. That doesn't mean it's always going to be unthinkable. It was just unthinkable for 80 years. Just like it was always unthinkable to attack Russian territory, but obviously it is now thinkable to provide targeting information to Ukraine in order to attack Russian territory, in order to attack Russian strategic bombers. Well, that was unthinkable. Now it's done. So, taboos are there until they're broken, and then after that, they're no longer taboos. So I think this is just a taboo that's going to go quite soon. The non-use of
Well,
nuclear weapons.
George is absolutely right. If there's any country in the world that's going to use them, it's Israel. That's for sure. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't think anyone would debate that. Okay.
yeah,
Um, from what I understand, it's chaos in the White House. They don't know what to do.
that's right.
Really don't.
That's
Uh,
that's that's right. That's right. And
I mean, that Kentucky rally. See, if you're not kind of plugged into inside baseball, it tells you. Looking at that rally, it tells a lot about what's going on in the United States right now. A
yes,
lot.
yes, yes. Um, yeah, no, I think so, and I think those Republicans who are supporting Trump, these are all people who hated Trump, and I think they're quite happy to see essentially Trump going down. He's
I
going down in
agree. I
flames.
absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. If
Yeah,
if someone has to go down, let it be him, because I don't think any of them really like him.
no,
Okay.
no, they say, yeah, go keep going. And then they're gonna just see because this reinforces really all of the anxieties that people had had about Trump all the way from 2015, which is what he's kind of erratic. Can we rely on this man who, grew up in the world of real estate and casinos, that he's going to be making wise decisions on the matter of international affairs and nuclear weapons. And first during his first term, he was sort of fairly cautious. Did some erratic things like the assassination of Soleimani, but generally cautious. Now he's thrown caution to the wind, and then so they can just sit back and just watch him go down in flames. So that's why the situation is very perilous for him. I have a feeling he's not going to complete his presidency one way or the other. I don't think he's going to finish his term.
Yeah, but don't you think the Israelis love the fact that he's erratic?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
They love
No,
it.
the more I think about it, and people I've talked to over the last 2 weeks, I've made it very clear also. And George and I try to stay away from predictions, but I find it really hard to believe he will finish his term.
Yeah,
I do. And I think if the GOP wants to avoid an extinction event, it's going to have to start moving very quickly.
yeah.
Okay.
I think
And and JD Vance has a lot of work to do to clean up what's going on if he
right,
wants to be a viable candidate. He is popular with the base. Okay. They
right.
do like him. Okay.
But he's
But
not saying much. I mean, where is
yeah, yeah. Well, no wonder, huh? Huh? No wonder.
he?
They've got that blathering idiot Graham just running his
Exactly. He's all
mouth.
over the place.
He's running his mouth. And
Exactly, exactly. And the more he runs his mouth, the more catastrophic everything becomes because you think this guy's unhinged. When he starts talking about, we're going to killing Iranians and rejoicing over killing Iranians, just like, it was, he was rejoicing about killing Russians. Russians are dying. I mean, somebody who talks like that, that's somebody with a serious mental health issue. So he's running his mouth. Where's Tulsi Gabbard? The one who was so firmly opposed for years about going to war against Iran. Where is she? I mean, you would have thought it would be no cost to her to resign. She could just
oh,
resign. And so
yeah,
that's
and she could change parties and become a Republican and be a viable candidate. Oh, that'd be awesome to run on that. I was the one that said no.
yeah,
Okay, I mean, okay, it's very Machiavellian. Okay, but that's what politics is all
right,
about.
right, right, yeah, yeah. And then I mean, by her staying on, she's completely discrediting herself. And I think it was Ray McGovern, maybe somebody else has said, but by the fact that Tulsi Gabbard stays on, essentially she was just chosen because she's a woman. That was part of his Trump's agenda, which was, hey, well, let's have some diversity. We'll hire a woman, but he never took anything that she said seriously. She's supposed to be head of intelligence. He never took any of it seriously, but had her on. Oh well, we'll have a pretty face.
Yeah, well, that may be true, but I think also in the mix is that the Trump and the people around the Trump just relished poaching Democrats to
Yeah, I
torture
think that's right.
JFK, Robert F.
Robert
Kennedy
Kennedy, Jr.
Jr.
Yeah, no,
is a great
that's
example.
right.
That
Yeah,
they took great glee in and at the same time, remember you have Liz Cheney campaigning with Kamala Harris.
that's right.
Okay, that
That's right.
was
Yeah,
a
no, that's yeah,
perfect symmetry there,
that's
as
right.
they. But
But
Georgia, I don't understand Lady Graham with him running his mouth. I mean, is that his portfolio right now? Is that what the White House wants him to do? I'm lost.
I understand. I mean, but everything is so strange because the media are full of all these characters from 2003. We have what Mark Thiessen. I don't know what Mark Thiessen. I mean,
Condi Rice was out there.
yeah, exactly. Condi Rice was invited to the White House. You're bringing all these people back. You campaign on no more Bush and Cheney, no more of these Bush Cheney wars. And there's Condi Rice in the White House. So there's now Mark Thiessen and then Michael Rubin. I mean, people have forgotten Michael Rubin. There's another figure from 2003. All of these, all of the 2003 alumni are now, gleeful. Hey, we're back. We've been vindicated. This is what we wanted. We wanted to take Iraq on first, and then we wanted to take on Iran. That's it. That's our plan. Trump was the one. We hated Trump. Trump is
Who,
the one who's
who
given
is,
us the agenda.
who's the one that said real men go to Tehran? Who said that?
I can't remember. One of these creatures. I'm sure he's
Yeah, one
around.
of these
Yeah.
creatures. Yeah.
Maybe Michael
Yeah, but
Levine.
George, it really makes you question. I mean, why do we need elections?
Right.
I mean, this is the DNA. This hubris is the part of the DNA. It doesn't matter who's in office. You get the same thing over
Yeah.
and over and over again. And it's so they do it with no shame. I
Right.
mean, Condoleezza Rice should not be show her face in public. Okay. I mean, she's got, that amazing gig at Stanford,
Right.
probably pays
Uh,
a
The
gazillion
Hoover,
dollars.
yeah, the Hoover Institution. He's director of the Hoover Institution, doing nothing basically, just lunches and dinners. That's all you do as president of the Hoover Institution. It's just money raising. That's all you do. So it's the greatest gig known to man. Yeah, so she's there, and then she was going on about Iran and saying, "Oh, well, they were responsible for all these deaths of American servicemen in Iraq."
I
You
saw
think,
that interview. Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
think, "Whoa,
And
just
the
a minute."
interviewers didn't
No,
stop her or, yeah.
no, 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 that's right. That was the classic one was when she was on Fox News in 2022 with Harris Faulkner. And Harris Faulkner said, well, look what Russia's done in Ukraine. Isn't that a violation of international law? I mean, that's the very definition of international law to invade another country. And Condi Rice said, yeah, absolutely. It's a terrible violation of international law. Harris Faulkner had absolutely no idea who she
She
was
seems like
talking
a
to,
nice, she seems like a nice person with an excellent posture, I must say.
but a
But
total dimwit.
a real, yeah, yeah, a dimwit.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's that's it. That's they can't do right. Oh, they did that's yeah. Well, you invaded a country. I mean, you sent these people. I mean, it's not Iran's responsibility. It's your responsibility. You sent those men into Iraq. I mean, it was an invasion, and well, lo and behold, people killed them. Whether it was Iran was behind it or not, you sent them into harm's way. Don't make it about Iran. It was you who who made that decision, an unnecessary decision. People warned you about it. You went ahead, and now you blame. Oh, look at what terrible things that Iran did.
No shame.
Yeah.
These people have no shame. All right, I think we've covered it here
Yeah.
pretty well. I mean, George was on the road last week, but we're still on course for our live stream tomorrow at
Live
10
stream at
o'clock.
exactly at 10 a.m.
Yeah, but see, the
Oh,
hours can
yeah, yeah,
change pretty soon.
yeah.
Uh, for,
That's
it
right.
works to my advantage.
That's
Okay.
right. Yeah,
All
that's
right.
right.
Anyway, we can keep an eye on this. Please write comments, things that you think we've missed, or maybe we should stress would be really helpful, because that encourages us to promote the tip jar.
That's
Okay.
that's the tip jar, and that of course brings up the dogs because the dogs are saying, well, I mean, we work a year in a day. Instead of enjoying the sunshine outside, it's spring. We're sitting indoors working hard, and I think that's just not the way we're supposed to do things. So, in order to address the concerns of the dogs, we basically have to see the tip jar moving in the appropriate direction. So if you have any money at all lying around, any gold coins, or crypto, I don't understand crypto, but I think Apple understands it. I think he's kind of explains how crypto works. But if you have crypto into that tip jar, we're very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can improve the technology. And above all, we're not going to have to listen any more of these dog complaints, about how hard they're working. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye bye.